The wind howled through the bus's glass windows, carrying the biting cold of the Colorado mountains. The diesel engine growled tired and old. The Greyhound slowed down its wheels, grinding on the gravel mixed with melting snow, creating a crunching sound like breaking bones. The driver did not look in the rearview mirror. He stared straight ahead into the white expanse, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "Highgate," he said. His voice was hoarse, lacking any inviting tone. It was a warning. The only remaining man on the bus stood up, Jack Reacher. He walked down the narrow aisle between two rows of empty seats. The floor shook violently beneath his shoes. Reacher carried no luggage, no backpack, no suitcase. His hands hung naturally at his sides, large as two boulders. He wore a surplus military canvas jacket, underneath which was a cheap gray t-shirt bought at a grocery store 3 states away. The bus door opened with a loud hissing sound. Reacher stepped down. The cold 10 degrees below zero immediately struck. It did not creep in, it slapped him in the face. The air was thin, dry, and reeked of sulfur. The bus door closed immediately. The wheels spun wildly, splattering black mud onto Reacher's pants before speeding away, leaving a winding trail of black smoke against the gray sky. The driver wanted to leave this place as quickly as possible. Reacher stood still. He did not hunch. His body automatically adjusted burning calories to retain heat. He took a deep breath. The smell of coal, the smell of diesel, and the smell of fear. It lurked in the wind, faint yet present. The town of Highgate lay nestled in a narrow valley wedged between 2 steep cliffs like the teeth of a giant predator. The snow here was not white. It was ash gray, covering the low roofs and deserted streets. No sign of people, no sound of children playing. Only the sound of a stone crusher from the distant quarry echoed steady and dull like the heartbeat of a sleeping monster. Reacher began to walk. He counted his steps, an unconscious habit. His stride was 36 inches long, a steady rhythm. He scanned the closed window wooden houses. The curtains fluttered slightly. Someone was watching. He needed coffee. At the end of the main road, a flickering neon sign weakly proclaimed Mary's Diner. The letter M had gone out, leaving only ARY, a truncated name. Reacher pushed the door open. The wind chime jingled cheerfully, oddly out of place. The interior was warm and reeked of burnt grease. The black and white tiled floor was worn. 4 round tables. A long counter ran along the right wall. 3 customers were scattered about. 2 men in orange work uniforms sat in a corner, muscular shoulders hunched over their plates. An old man sat near the window, trembling hands clutching a tattered newspaper. When Reacher entered, all movement ceased. No one spoke. No one looked up directly, but Reacher felt the weight of furtive glances. The silence enveloping the room was not peaceful. It was the stillness of reptiles, a frozen state before an attack or retreat. Reacher walked to the counter. He chose the 3rd stool from the door, a strategic position, his back to the wall, his eyes able to survey both the front door and the entrance to the kitchen. The stool creaked under his 250-pound weight. Behind the counter was a woman. She was about 35 years old. Her blonde hair was hastily tied back, with a few strands falling over her forehead matted with sweat. Her face had sharp features but was worn down by fatigue and constant anxiety. Her deep-set eyes had dark circles visible beneath a thin layer of makeup. She paused while wiping a glass when she saw Reacher. Reacher placed both hands on the counter. His hands nearly covered the entire surface of the wood. "Coffee," Reacher said. His voice was deep, resonating in the stillness. "Black, hot, no sugar." The woman whose shirt bore the name Mary Ellen blinked. She looked behind Reacher toward the 2 men in work uniforms, then back at him. Her gaze held no curiosity. It contained suppressed panic. "We're about to close," she said. Her voice was thin, fragile. The clock in Reacher's mind struck 10 o'clock in the morning. 10 o'clock in the morning, Reacher said. An odd time to close a diner. "We're out of coffee," she lied. Pathetic. The smell of burnt Arabica beans still lingered in the air. Reacher did not argue. He simply looked at her. He did not glare, he just looked, the gaze of an old lion observing an injured antelope. Not threatening, but penetrating. "You are trembling," Reacher said. Mary Ellen flinched, nearly dropping the cup. She quickly hid her 2 hands beneath the counter. "You don't belong here," she whispered, bending low, pretending to wipe the counter. "You need to go, right now." Before... The sound of a chair scraping against the floor interrupted her words. One of the 2 men in protective gear stood up. He was large, with a neck retracted on broad shoulders, his head shaved bald. He walked towards Reacher. The sound of his cleated shoes pounding against the tiled floor was deafening. Reacher did not turn his head. He looked at the dim reflection of the man in the yellowed mirror behind the bar. The man stopped 2 paces from Reacher's back, an invasive distance. He emanated the smell of sour sweat and machine oil. "Are you deaf or stupid?" the man asked. His voice was deep and confrontational. The lady said, "We're out of coffee." Reacher remained silent. He slowly turned on the stool. He faced the bald man. Though seated, his gaze was level with the man's chest. He looked at the name tag on the man's shirt. "More security." "I am not talking to you," Reacher said, gently. The bald man smirked. He was used to others being afraid. He reached out, intending to grab Reacher's coat collar, a gesture of superiority, a tactical mistake. Reacher did not stand up. He simply raised his left hand as quick as a flash, grabbing the man's wrist. Reacher's fingers tightened. The bald man froze. The smile vanished. His eyes widened. He tried to pull his hand back, but it was futile. His wrist felt as if it were caught in a steel vise. Reacher did not twist. He just held steady, silent. "Coffee," Reacher said to Mary Ellen, his eyes still fixed on the bald man. "And a fried egg, sunny side up, with bacon." The bald man let out a small groan in his throat. Blood began to rush to his face, turning it bright red. He used his other hand to reach into his pants pocket where something bulged. A pocket knife, or a baton. Reacher tightened his grip a little more. A small crack echoed. Not a bone breaking, but the ligaments being stretched to their limits. The bald man knelt down. Pain shot through his arm, striking directly at the nerve center. He gasped for breath. "Don't," Reacher said. "Don't do anything stupid. I haven't had breakfast." He released his hand. The bald man staggered back, clutching his swollen wrist. He looked at Reacher with a mix of horror and hatred. He had never encountered someone like this, someone who did not need to stand up to win. "You're done for," the man hissed through clenched teeth. "You have no idea whose land this is." He turned around, signaling to his remaining accomplice. Both hurriedly left the diner. The wind chimes rang out again, this time sounding like a death knell. The silence returned heavier than ever. The old man sitting by the window folded the newspaper, stood up, and quietly walked to the door, not daring to look Reacher in the eye. Now only Reacher and Mary Ellen remained. She stood frozen behind the counter, her face drained of color. "What did you just do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You're crazy. James Moore will kill you. He will kill all of us." Reacher turned back to the counter. He clasped his hands together. "Who is James Moore?" he asked. Mary Ellen did not answer. She looked out the window where the pickup truck of the 2 men from earlier was revving its engine and speeding away. She knew where they were going, and she knew what would come next. She trembled as she took the glass jar, pouring coffee into a thick, white ceramic cup. The stream of dark, steaming liquid rose in a cloud. She placed the cup of coffee in front of Reacher. Her hand lightly brushed against his, ice cold. "Drink," she said, her eyes glistening with tears. "Drink quickly and run. Up the mountain. Don't take the main road. You might still make it." Reacher lifted the cup. He inhaled the bitter aroma. He took a sip. The hot coffee burned his tongue, coursing down his throat like lava, awakening every sense. "I'm not running," Reacher said. "I just got here." He set the cup down on the table. The sound of porcelain clashing against wood echoed sharply. Mary Ellen looked at him, desperate. She pulled something from her apron pocket, an old flip phone. She pressed a series of numbers, her hand shaking so much she had to press them twice, but there was no signal. "It's useless," Reacher said. He had observed the antenna tower on the mountain when he entered the town. It was broken not from a storm, The sharp break in the metal had been cut with bolt cutters. "There's no signal," he continued. "We're in a sealed box." Mary Ellen let her hand drop the phone, sliding down the counter. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice cracking. Reacher looked out the window, where the gray snow began to fall thicker, obscuring the view of the distant mine. "The bus broke down," Reacher lied. "Half the truth." He cut a piece of egg, the yolk spilling onto the plate. He began to eat calmly, as if he were sitting in a fancy restaurant in New York rather than in a deadly trap in Colorado. Outside, the sound of truck engines echoed from afar. Not one truck, but a convoy. Reacher glanced at the clock in his head. 10, 15, quick response, a large force. He took another sip of coffee. The game had begun. The coffee in the cup had diminished by half. The temperature had dropped to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, just enough to take a long sip without burning the mucous membranes of his tongue. Reacher wiped the egg yolk from the plate with a piece of charred toast. Protein, carbohydrates, fuel for the colossal biological machine. He set down his knife and fork. The two metallic clinks rang sharply on the rough wooden table. Mary Ellen jumped. Her shoulders shrank as if the sound was the click of a bullet being chambered. She stood behind the counter, her hands gripping the edge of the stainless steel sink. Her knuckles were white, devoid of any blood flow. Her eyes were glued to the entrance, her pupils dilated, swallowing the pale blue of her irises. That is the physiological reaction of herbivorous creatures when they smell blood. Adrenaline is pumping straight into her heart, but the flight mechanism is paralyzed. "You don't understand," Mary Ellen whispered. Her voice emerged from a constricted larynx. "James Moore does not forgive. He never lets go." Reacher rotated the porcelain cup in his hand. "James Moore is a common name," he said. "There are 3,000 people named James Moore in the phone directory across the United States. 21 people are serving sentences in federal prisons. 8 are CEOs of companies in the Fortune 500. He owns this town," she said. "He owns the quarry. He owns the road. He owns the sheriff." Reacher looked out the window. The snow was falling thicker. Visibility dropped below 50 yards. "The sheriff is elected by the people," Reacher said. "That's the law. There are no elections here, only appointments." Reacher noted the information. "A company town, a 19th century feudal model existing in the heart of modern America." This explained the attitude of the two thugs earlier. They were not petty criminals. They were the guards of a lord. "You have to leave now," Mary Ellen repeated. She began to move around the bar, an aimless circle, her hands groping for unnecessary items. A desperate attempt to regain control in a situation that had spiraled out of control. Reacher shook his head. "Not yet," he said. "I haven't paid, and I have no mean." The sound of an engine echoed from the top of the slope. Mary Ellen went silent. She stopped breathing for 2 seconds. The sound grew louder. It was neither the crisp explosion of a gasoline engine nor the rumbling growl of the old truck from earlier. This was the deep, throaty rumble of a large, turbocharged diesel engine, the sound of heavy-duty tires grinding on the wet gravel road. Reacher listened. He analyzed the sound. The vehicle's weight was about 3 tons. A stiff suspension, a long wheelbase, a large SUV or a modified military pickup. The vehicle stopped right in front of the bar. The headlights pierced through the snow, shining directly onto Reacher's back. The car door opened. The sound of heavy footsteps thudding on the wooden porch. Heavy, decisive. Mary Ellen backed up until her back hit the refrigerator behind her. She looked at Reacher as if looking at a dead man. Her fear was the most accurate measure of the strength of the person about to enter. She was not afraid of being beaten. She was afraid of being destroyed. The door to the bar swung open. The cold wind rushed in, carrying the smell of unburned diesel. A man stepped inside. He was not the bald guy from earlier. He stood 6 feet 3 inches shorter than Reacher, but far more imposing. He wore an expensive navy blue parka, the kind used for Arctic expeditions. Underneath were tactical cargo pants and a pair of Bates boots designed for tactical police work. On the left chest of his jacket was a gold-threaded logo, Moore Global Defense. The bald guy followed behind, still clutching his swollen wrist. his head bowed but his eyes fierce. The parka-clad man removed his sunglasses, revealing cold, ash-gray eyes. He scanned the room, gliding past the trembling Mary Ellen, and stopped at Reacher's broad back. He did not draw a gun, but Reacher knew he had one. The way the jacket bulged at his right hip betrayed a large semi-automatic pistol. It could be a Sig Sauer P-226 or a Beretta 92 FS. His stance shifted weight onto his left leg, his right hand relaxed near his holster, a habit of professionals or veterans. Reacher turned around, slowly, quietly. He did not stand up. "You are the drifter," the parka-clad man said. Not a question, a statement. His voice carried a Boston accent worn down over years of shouting in the military. Reacher did not respond. He looked at the man's shoes, clean Vibram soles, no mud from the quarry. This guy belonged to the command class, middle management. "I am Walker," the man said, "head of security. You just assaulted one of my employees." Reacher took his last sip of coffee. "He was going to touch me," Reacher said. "I don't like being touched." Walker stepped forward. He invaded the 12-foot personal space. He wanted to use physical pressure to intimidate, a mistaken tactic when the opponent weighed 250 pounds. "This is private property," Walker said. "James Moore's land stretches from the southern canyon to the northern mountain range. You are trespassing." Reacher looked straight into Walker's eyes. "This is a public diner," he said. "There is a business license. The door is open. The sign is lit. According to Colorado State Law Section 18-4-201, the definition of trespassing does not apply to commercial establishments during business hours unless there is a clear verbal or written request to leave from the owner or manager." He pointed towards Mary Ellen. "She is the owner. She hasn't kicked me out." Walker glanced at Mary Ellen. His gaze was like a razor blade gliding across her skin. "Mary," Walker said, his voice chillingly gentle, "do you want this guest to stay?" Mary Ellen's mouth fell open. Her lips were dry. She looked at the gun peeking out from under Walker's jacket, then at Reacher. The palpable fear choked her throat. She wanted to say no, wanted to scream for Reacher to leave to save his life and her fragile peace, but no sound escaped. She could only weakly shake her head. Walker turned back to Reacher, a triumphant smirk on his lips. "She didn't say yes. That means you're not welcome." He pulled a stack of money from his inner jacket pocket, crisp $100 bills. He tossed them onto the table right next to Reacher's empty plate of eggs. "Bus fare," Walker said, "and compensation for my employee's risk. Take it. Walk to the crossroads. A vehicle will pass by within 3 hours. If you are still here after noon, I will consider you a level 1 security threat." Reacher looked at the stack of money. About $2,000. Enough to live for 6 months by his standards. He checked the time in his head. 10:32. He stood up. Reacher's shadow loomed over Walker. He was 3 inches taller than the security guard and weighed over 60 pounds more. The space in the diner seemed to be sucked away by his bulk. Walker did not back down, but his pupils contracted slightly. An unconditional reflex. Reacher picked up the stack of money. He rubbed his thumb across the surface of the bills. "New money," Reacher said. "Consecutive serial numbers. The ink still smells of solvent." He let the stack of money fall to the floor in a flutter. "I don't take bribes," Reacher said, "and I don't like being ordered around." Walker stiffened. His right hand twitched slightly towards his hip. A moment of hesitation. He was calculating the risk. Drawing a gun at a distance of 2 meters from a giant who was ready to fight was a gamble. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life," Walker growled. Reacher took a step forward. Walker was forced to back up to maintain distance. "The mistake is what you're making," Reacher said. "You drive a level B4 armored Ford Excursion. I heard the suspension groaning when you parked. You carry a Sig P-229. Loaded with hollow point ammunition. I see the delay in your jacket. You are a mercenary, Walker, and mercenaries only fight for pay, not for loyalty." Reacher leaned his face close to Walker's. "I do not fight for money. I fight because I like it." Walker gritted his teeth. He realized he was facing something beyond the scope of security training. He turned to the bald man, signaling with his head. "Go," Walker said. He stepped back to the door, his eyes never leaving. "Reacher." 12 noon, Walker said before closing the door. "That is the deadline. After that time, you are a live target." The door closed. The sound of the diesel engine roared and then faded away. Mary Ellen slid down to the floor, sitting flat behind the bar, her hands covering her face. "You have killed us both," she sobbed. "You do not know what James Moore is hiding up there. No one is allowed to challenge him." Reacher picked up the bill from the table. He placed a $5 bill down, pressing it on top of the bill. "What is he hiding?" Reacher asked. "I do not know," Mary Ellen said, tears streaming through her fingers. "My husband knows, and now he is dead." Reacher paused. The clock in his head continued to tick steadily. But the plan to leave had come to a halt. One man dead, a rich bald man protected by mercenaries, a town cut off from communication, and a blatant injustice right before his eyes. Reacher looked out the window toward the gray, snow-covered peaks. 12 noon. He had 85 minutes to prepare. Reacher glanced at the clock on the wall. 10:45. The clock was running 2 minutes slow compared to real time. He adjusted the time in his head. 73 minutes until the deadline. Mary Ellen was still sitting flat on the floor. She was no longer crying. The tears had run dry, replaced by a state of complete numbness. She stared at the $100 bills scattered across the dirty floor as if they were fragments of a bomb that had just exploded. Reacher stepped closer. He bent down, picking up each bill. The movements were slow and precise. 19 bills. $1,900. He stacked them neatly and placed them on the counter right next to her hand. "Get up," Reacher said. Mary Ellen looked up, her pupils dilated, reflecting his enormous shadow. She clutched the hem of Reacher's jeans to help herself stand. Her hand was as cold as stone. "You do not understand," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Frank was like you. He thought he could reason. He thought the law still existed." Reacher returned to the stool. He turned around facing the window, his eyes scanning the empty road. The snow was falling thicker. The wind howled through the gaps of the rotting wooden frame. "Frank is your husband," Reacher asserted. Mary Ellen nodded. She poured more coffee into his cup. Her trembling hand caused the dark liquid to spill over. "He was the logistics manager for the Highgate quarry," she said. "He worked for James Moore for 10 years. A good man. A man of numbers." Reacher took the coffee cup. "He did not care about the spilled water. Numbers," Reacher repeated. "Frank found the discrepancy," Mary Ellen said. She stepped back, keeping her distance from the window, as if fearing a sniper's bullet could pierce the glass at any moment. 3 months ago, he said the records did not match reality. He said the outgoing load did not correspond to the number of trucks. Reacher took a sip of coffee. The bitter taste spread across his tongue. His brain began to operate. Quarry, granite, or limestone. The average specific weight of granite is 170 pounds per cubic foot. A standard 3-axle dump truck like a Peterbilt or Kenworth has a maximum load capacity of about 20 tons. "How much discrepancy?" Reacher asked. He didn't specify a number. He just said that the trucks leaving at night were too light. The engine noise wasn't heavy enough. The tires didn't sink deep enough. Reacher recalled the sound he heard when he stepped off the bus, the sound of the rock crusher, steady, deep, and dull, and the sound of Walker's SUV just leaving. The diesel V8 Power Stroke 6.7-liter engine. "The trucks are leaving too light," Reacher said. "That means they aren't carrying rock." Frank went to see Moore. He wanted to report the loss. He thought the drivers were skimming fuel or running empty to falsely account for hours worked. Mary Ellen paused, her breath caught in her chest. She looked at Reacher, and in that gaze Reacher saw the image of Frank's corpse before she could describe it. "The next morning they found Frank at the bottom of the North Gorge," she said. "The sheriff concluded it was an accident due to drunk driving. Frank never drank more than 1 beer in his life." Reacher set down his cup. "How deep is the North Gorge?" 300 feet. The truck was shattered. The body was shattered. Reacher tapped his fingers on the table. The rhythm, 3-2-3. Highgate is located at an elevation of 8,000 feet above sea level. The thin air, reduces engine combustion efficiency by about 3% for every 1,000 feet of elevation. An empty truck climbing a slope at this altitude would have a very distinctive sound. The turbo would whine higher. The exhaust would be clearer. Frank was a logistics guy. He had the ears for the job. He was right. But the issue wasn't petty theft. James Moore owned a private military company. Walker was a professional soldier. A security team, armed with Sig Sauer handguns and body armor, wasn't hired just to guard a few tons of construction stone. "Does this town have a railway?" Reacher asked. Mary Ellen was surprised by the question. She blinked, trying to catch up with his train of thought. "There is an old abandoned track from the 70s. It runs straight into the quarry but is blocked by a steel barrier. And the road. There is only one main road. Highway 40 runs through the canyon." Reacher nodded. "Perfect tactical terrain. One way in, one way out. Easy to control, easy to seal off. A natural fortress. If the trucks weren't hauling rock out, then the quarry was just a facade. The sound of the rock crusher operating day and night was merely auditory camouflage. Walker mentioned a deadline of 12 o'clock, Reacher said. He will come back, and he will not come alone. Mary Ellen shrank back. She looked out the door. "You have to go. There is a trail leading through the eastern slope. Locals use it to hunt deer. You can escape." Reacher stood up. He walked toward the window, standing close to the wall to avoid being seen. He looked out at the main road. Snow had blanketed the roadway. All traces of Walker's tires had been erased. "I need a map," Reacher said. "A topographic map of the area, 1 to 24,000 scale if available." "What for?" "To run away." Reacher turned back. He looked straight at her. The calmness on his face was in stark contrast to the panic ravaging her nerves. That contrast made Mary Ellen feel small, but at the same time ignited something like hope, however fragile. "To go hunting," Reacher said. Mary Ellen trembled as she rummaged through the cash register drawer. She pulled out a tattered travel map folded into quarters. She placed it on the table, smoothing out the creases with her hands, though her fingers continued to shake. Reacher looked at the map. The terrain of Highgate appeared in his mind like a military model. The closely spaced contour lines indicated steep cliffs. The quarry was located to the north, backed against the rock face. The only road ran along the valley like a noose. He pointed to a spot on the map, a small black triangle symbol. "What is this?" "An old transformer station," Mary Ellen said. "It has been decommissioned. Moore built a power plant for the quarry," Reacher calculated. A typical quarry consumed a large amount of electricity for crushers and conveyors, but a separate power plant, that was a sign of high and stable energy demand, or a need for power grid security, ventilation system, air filtration system, or industrial cooling system. He folded the map and stuffed it into his jacket pocket. "Thank you for breakfast," Reacher said. He walked toward the door. "Where are you going?" Mary Ellen asked, her voice rising in panic. "You don't have a gun." "You have nothing." Reacher paused. His hand rested on the cold doorknob. "I don't need a gun," he said. "Not yet." He opened the door. The cold wind rushed in, blowing Mary Ellen's hair. Reacher stepped outside, blending into the white snow curtain. The clock in his head marked 11:15, 45 minutes left. Walker had given him a time frame. That was his second mistake. He thought Reacher would use that time to run away. He didn't know that Reacher would use it to scout. Reacher did not head toward the crossroads. He turned left, weaving through a narrow alley between two abandoned warehouses, heading straight toward the sound of the stone crusher echoing from afar. He moved against the wind. The smell of diesel guided him. The beast had left its den. The snow fell thicker. Visibility dropped below 30 yards, a murky white curtain. Reacher moved along the western fence of the industrial area. He did not walk on the road. He walked in the shallow drainage ditch, running parallel to the fence, where the snow piled up to his knees, obscuring his footprints. The sound of the stone crusher was clear, a rough mechanical rhythm. Thud, rattle, thud, rattle, a frequency of 60 beats per minute. Like the heartbeat of a resting athlete, Reacher stopped. He pressed himself against the cold B-40 steel mesh. He removed his right glove, touching his index finger to the metal mesh. He felt the vibrations. The vibrations traveled from the ground up the fence. They were not synchronized with the crusher's noise. They were faster, a higher tempo, a low-frequency resonance. Ventilation system, Reacher calculated. To create vibrations that traveled 300 yards through the frozen granite ground, the fan system must have a power of at least 500 horsepower. The kind used for road tunnels or underground bunkers, not for an open-pit quarry. He looked up. Security cameras mounted on concrete poles every 50 yards. The new pan-tilt zoom type equipped with infrared. But the heavy snowfall obscured the lens. Light diffraction, blind spots appeared. Reacher continued to move. At the end of the drainage ditch stood an old brick building isolated from the residential area, but not within the confines of the mining site. A peeling wooden sign hung askew before the door. Private office, Dr. 7. Waterson. The windows were dark. The chimney did not emit smoke. Reacher stepped up to the porch. He tried the doorknob. Locked. He did not break the lock. He knocked on the door. 3 knocks. Strong, sharp, steady. Silence. Reacher knocked again. This time harder. The paint on the wooden door flaked off. The sound of shuffling footsteps inside. The sound of a safety latch being disengaged. Click. The sound of a round being chambered in a pump-action rifle. Reacher stepped back, standing to the right of the door frame, avoiding a direct line of fire. The door opened 2 inches. A black barrel protruded. "Get lost," a hoarse voice rang out. "I don't have any painkillers for you junkies." "I'm not a junkie," Reacher said. His voice was calm, echoing in the thin air. "And I don't need drugs." "Then what do you need?" "Information." The door began to close again. Reacher wedged the toe of his shoe into the gap. The rubber sole, about 47, stopped the oak door. "Get lost before I blow your leg off." "That's a Mossberg 500, Reacher said. 18.5-inch barrel, a 5-round magazine tube, plus 1 in the chamber, 12-gauge shells. At this distance the shot won't spread. It will act like a solid slug. It won't just blow my leg off, it will blow my entire lower leg away." Silence enveloped behind the door. A hesitation. Technical knowledge created authority. "You are a doctor," Reacher continued. "You took the Hippocratic oath. You won't shoot an unarmed man standing out in the snow." The door opened wider. An old man stood there, about 60 years old, hair white and disheveled. He wore a tattered sweater and dirty khaki pants. In his hand was indeed an old Mossberg 500, the worn steel revealing silver beneath. He looked at Reacher. His eyes squinted, trying to gauge the size of the massive hulk before him. He was not afraid in the way Mary Ellen was. He was afraid like an old dog that had been kicked too many times. "You're the big guy from the diner," he said. "News travels fast in a small town." "I need to get inside," Reacher said. "It's cold out here." Waterson lowered the gun slightly. He stepped back, signaling for Reacher to enter. The room inside reeked of medical alcohol, cheap cigarettes and mildew. An old examination table sat in the middle of the room. A broken glass medicine cabinet. On the wall hung a yellowed diploma from the University of Colorado Medical School and a black and white photo of a medical unit in Vietnam, 1970. Reacher closed the door behind him. He leaned against the door, blocking the draft. The room immediately felt cramped. Waterson sat down in a swivel chair, the gun still resting on his thigh. He looked at Reacher, his hand trembling as he lit a hand-rolled cigarette. "Walker is searching everywhere," Waterson said. "He's offering $5,000 for anyone who tips him off about you. You coming here brings a death sentence to my doorstep." "You used to be a medic," Reacher said, his eyes glancing at the photo on the wall. "Aviation Cavalry Division." Pleiku Waterson halted. The cigarette on his lips stopped burning red. He looked at Reacher with a different gaze. The wariness shifted to professional curiosity. "How do you know? The way you hold your gun? Your index finger is straight along the trigger guard, military firearm discipline, and the scar on your left forearm? A burn from a hot shell casing from an M60 machine gun while you were tending to a comrade under fire." Waterson unconsciously rubbed his hand over the old scar. "Who are you, Jack Reacher?" former military police, 110th Airborne Division. Waterson relaxed his shoulders. The Mossberg slid slightly on his thigh. An invisible bond was established, the brotherhood of those who had walked through hell. "What do you want, Reacher?" Reacher stepped to the window, looking through the filthy curtain towards the mining area. "Frank Ellen was right," Reacher said. "The trucks coming out are empty, but the rock-crushing machine is still running. Frank is a good man, but overly curious." "What are they doing in there?" Doc Waterson took a long drag from his cigarette, exhaling smoke into the low ceiling. "I don't know exactly, but I know what comes out of there is not rock." "What have you seen?" "The bodies," Waterson said. His voice dropped colder than the snowstorm outside. Reacher turned back. "Work accident. No. I am the only forensic doctor in this damn town. The sheriff brings the bodies here before filing the death certificates. He tells me to record it as a mining accident. Cave-in. Rocks fell. Equipment failure. But the injuries don't match." Waterson stood up, walked to the filing cabinet, and pulled out a stack of papers bound in cardboard. He tossed it onto the table. "Multiple fractures. Extensive soft tissue damage. But no rock dust in the lungs. No characteristic scratches from granite. Their skin." Waterson paused, searching for the precise words. "Their skin was chemically burned. And there are signs of acute radiation poisoning." Reacher flipped through the files. The photos of the pale corpses, the lesions on the skin, hair falling out in patches, radiation poisoning. Reacher connected the dots. The sound of high-powered ventilation, a separate electrical system, tight security, the empty trucks. "Uranium," Reacher said. "Colorado has uranium mines," Waterson said. "But the Highgate mine is a limestone quarry, unless Moore found a vein that no one knows about. Or he's using the quarry as a processing site," Reacher deduced. "Centrifuges. They need stable electricity and extremely powerful cooling systems. The rock-crushing machine is just to mask the high-pitched whine of the centrifuges." Suddenly, the sound of tires crunching on snow echoed from outside. The blue-white headlights swept through the window, casting long mottled beams of light on the ceiling. Waterson froze. He grabbed the gun. "Patrol officers," he whispered, "or Walker's men." Reacher did not move. He stood still in the shadows in the corner of the room. His breath slowed, 12 beats per minute. He melded into the shadow of the medicine cabinet. The sound of the car slowed down. It came to a complete stop in front of the clinic. The car door opened. The crackling of a radio was heard. Dr. A. booming voice echoed in. "Open the door!" Waterson looked at Reacher. The fear returned, choking his throat. He was an old, lonely man, weak before the powerful. Reacher raised his finger to his lips. He pointed at the gun, then pointed at the door. "Out there, normal." Waterson swallowed hard. He placed the gun against the table, adjusted his shirt, then stepped out to open the door. Reacher observed through the crack of the cabinet door. 2 police officers, brownish-yellow uniforms. One was fat, the other skinny. Both wore sunglasses despite the snowstorm. "Seen any strange faces, Doc?" the fat one asked, hand resting on the grip of his gun at his hip. "No," Waterson replied. His voice trembled, but it was convincing enough. "Just me and this pile of paperwork." The skinny officer stepped forward, sniffing. "Smells like someone unfamiliar," he said. "Old patient," Waterson said quickly. "Just left a moment ago. Foot infection." The officer stared at Waterson's face, then glanced over his shoulder, peering into the darkness of the clinic. Reacher stood 15 feet away from him. He looked straight into his eyes through the dark sunglasses, even though he could not see him. He was calculating. A distance of 15 feet, 2 targets, 1 narrow door. If the guy stepped in, Reacher would have to act. The skinny guy smirked. "If you see him, call the sheriff immediately. Don't be a hero, Doc." He turned his back, walking back to the car. "Let's go," he said to the fat one. "He's not here. This old man is scared as a mouse." The car door slammed shut. The sound of the engine faded away. Waterson closed the door, leaned against it, and slid down to the ground. He exhaled, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. "They're gone," he said. Reacher stepped out of the shadows. "They will come back," he said. "They are suspicious now." He looked at the clock in his mind. 12 minutes to 12. How many gates does the quarry have? Reacher asked. One main gate. One secondary gate at the back for the waste transport vehicles. Waste transport vehicles, chemical drums, Waterson said. They come in at night, dumping into the canyon to the west. Reacher nodded. That was the weak point. That was the entrance. He walked to the table, grabbed a roll of medical gauze and a bottle of 90-degree alcohol. I'm borrowing this, Reacher said. For what? A little fireworks, Reacher said. To say hello to James Moore. He opened the door and stepped out into the snowstorm. Waterson watched the giant shadow fade into the white curtain. He felt a new fear. Not fear of Reacher, but fear for those about to face Reacher. The storm wind howled outside, but inside Mary Ellen's diner, the air thickened, heavy and flammable like gasoline vapor. Reacher sat at the round table closest to the window, a deadly position if there were snipers. But in a snowstorm with zero visibility, this was a command position. He placed the bottle of 90-degree alcohol on the wooden table. Next to it was the roll of medical gauze. Mary Ellen stood behind the counter. She was no longer wiping glasses. She was cracking her knuckles. The sound was dry and irregular, betraying a heart rate exceeding 120 beats per minute. She looked at the bottle of alcohol, then at Reacher, then back at the door. Her gaze oscillated continuously like a broken clock pendulum. Are you planning to burn down my diner? She asked, her breath short. Reacher did not answer. He opened the bottle of alcohol. The sharp smell of isopropyl rose, overpowering the scent of burnt grease and old coffee. He stuffed a piece of gauze into the mouth of the bottle, using his thumb to press it tightly to soak up the liquid. A crude Molotov cocktail, the weapon of street rebels, or infantry soldiers when they run out of grenades. 11:59, Reacher said. The clock in his head counted down the last 60 seconds. Mary Ellen stepped back, her back hitting the liquor shelf. A cheap whiskey bottle rattled. She knew what was about to happen. Her fear was no longer an invisible panic. It had taken on a specific shape, the shape of James Moore, of Walker, of death. They will kill you, she whispered, and this time they won't talk. Exactly 12 o'clock. There was no sound of a clock chiming, only the sound of tires grinding on gravel. The Ford Excursion turned back. This time it was not alone. Following it was a heavy Dodge Ram 3500. Its bed covered tightly with a tarp. The two vehicles parked diagonally across the diner entrance, forming a tactical V. The headlights shone directly into the window, blinding anyone looking out. The car doors opened. Walker stepped down. He no longer had the arrogant demeanor of a security manager. He wore the expression of a hunter who had spotted his prey. He was wearing a Kevlar vest over his parka. The level of threat had been upgraded. Following him were 4 men, not locals, not the bald guy with the broken arm, Reacher observed through the fogged glass. The 4 newcomers moved in a diamond formation. The way they held their guns, the way they scanned the blind spots, the way they maintained distance from each other. Professional mercenaries, possibly former Blackwater or Triple Canopy. They carried short-barreled assault carbines concealed under their long coats, but the barrels still created an unmistakable outline. The diner door swung open. Walker entered first. The other 4 followed immediately, spreading out to both sides, taking control of the corners of the room. Guns were not drawn yet, but hands were already positioned inside their jackets. Mary Ellen slid down to the floor. She did not faint, but her legs no longer obeyed the commands of her brain. She sat there curling up as small as possible like a child, waiting for a beating. Reacher remained seated. His left hand rested lightly on the bottle of alcohol. His right hand lay on the table empty. Walker approached Reacher's table. He stopped 6 feet away, out of Reacher's reach. He had learned his lesson. 12:01, Walker said. You're 1 minute late. Reacher looked at the 4 new soldiers. 4 of them, Reacher said. The average salary of a private security contractor domestically is $500 a day, plus mountain risk allowances. James Moore is spending $2,000 just to chase 1 man out of the lunch diner. Walker smirked. The smile did not reach his eyes. Do you think this is a money issue? I think this is a yellow cake issue, Reacher said. The words fell in the room like a block of concrete. Walker stiffened, his pupils dilated to the maximum. The 4 soldiers behind him also froze for a moment. Yellow cake, refined uranium in powder form, the most sensitive keyword in the military underground. Reacher had thrown a semantic grenade. Mary Ellen looked up, bewildered. She did not understand the word, but she saw Walker's reaction. She saw fear flicker across the face of the man she thought was invulnerable. For the first time that day she saw Walker could also be afraid. "You know too much for a drifter," Walker said. His voice dropped, more dangerous. His hand slowly withdrew from his pocket. "A Sig Sauer P. 226. I know centrifuges need stable voltage," Reacher said, his voice steady as if reading a physics textbook. "I know HF, hydrofluoric acid used to enrich uranium, will corrode skin and bone if not handled properly. And I know the corpses without death certificates are real." Walker aimed the gun at Reacher's chest. The other 4 drew their weapons too. 4 short-barreled MP5Ks, firepower enough to flatten this diner. "You will not leave here," Walker said. "Never." Reacher picked up the Zippo lighter on the table. He flipped the lid. Click. The blue flame flared up. He brought the flame close to the alcohol-soaked bandage. 90 proof alcohol, Reacher said. Flash point 12 degrees Celsius. Burn spread rate 3 meters per second. If I drop this bottle, it will shatter. The alcohol vapor will ignite. In this 15 square meter enclosed space, the temperature will rise to 800 degrees Celsius within 4 seconds. He looked directly into Walker's eyes. "You have Kevlar armor. It stops 9mm bullets. But Kevlar melts at 500 degrees Celsius. It will drip, sticking to your flesh like boiling tar." Walker hesitated. He watched the Zippo flame dance. He was a soldier. He was not afraid of bullets. But fire was a primal fear. "You will die too," Walker growled. "I will burn to death," Reacher said, "but I will die standing, while you will die screaming and trying to claw the molten plastic off your chest." Silence enveloped them. A battle of wits. Walker had a gun. Reacher had physics and calculated madness. Mary Ellen held her breath. She looked at Reacher as if he were a god of destruction. She no longer trembled. Reacher's overwhelming presence had sucked all the air out, leaving no oxygen for fear to exist. Walker lowered his gun slightly. 1 millimeter, a sign of subconscious concession. "What do you want?" Walker asked. "I want lunch," Reacher said, "and I want you to get out of here, right now." Walker gritted his teeth. He looked at his 4 soldiers. They were waiting for orders, but their eyes were also glued to the bottle of alcohol. No one wanted to burn to death in a shabby diner in the middle of a snowstorm. "You won this round," Walker said, "but I will be back with a sniper rifle, with grenades. I will turn this place to ashes." "Go ahead and try," Reacher said, "but remember to bring fireproof gear." Walker holstered his gun. He turned his back, signaling for the soldiers to withdraw. "Go," he ordered. The group backed out the door, guns still aimed at Reacher. The door closed. The engine roared angrily and then faded away. Reacher extinguished the Zippo lighter. Click. He did not relax. His muscles remained tense. Mary Ellen crawled up. She clung to the edge of the table, staring at Reacher in disbelief. "You," she stammered. "Did you just chase Walker away with a bottle of antiseptic?" Reacher pushed the bottle of alcohol towards her. "Put it away," he said, "and get your stuff ready. We have to leave here." "Leave where?" "Up to the quarry." Reacher stood up. "We won't wait for them to come back. We will go find them." He looked out the window. The snowstorm was still howling. The storm swallowed every sound. The wind was gusting at 7 with a speed of 30 miles per hour. The temperature felt like -20 degrees Fahrenheit. Reacher and Mary Ellen stepped out the back door of the diner. The snow was knee-deep. "Stay close to the wall," Reacher said. Mary Ellen nodded. She said nothing. Her teeth chattered, partly from the cold, mostly from the aftershocks of the recent confrontation. She looked at Reacher's broad back, shielding her from the wind. It was like a moving wall separating her from death. They moved 50 yards. Reacher stopped. He raised his right hand. Mary Ellen froze, pressing herself against the damp wooden wall of an abandoned shed. "What is it?" she whispered. "Engine," Reacher said. He took a deep breath. The smell of diesel. Not the faint smell of diesel in the wind from the quarry. A strong, close scent. Reacher crouched low, peering over the edge of the wall. 30 yards away, a black Dodge Ram 3500 was parked with its lights off in the narrow alley across the street. The exhaust was releasing white smoke steadily. The windows were tinted. A thin layer of snow had settled on the hood, indicating it had only been parked there for about 5 minutes. Walker had left a tail, a checkpoint. "Stay here," Reacher said. "Count to 60. "What are you going to do?" Reacher did not answer. He disappeared into the snowstorm. He did not walk straight. He moved in a curve, using the whistling wind to mask the sound of his footsteps. The rubber soles of his shoes compressed the snow, creating deep holes but making no noise. Reacher approached the car from behind on the passenger side. The blind spot of the rear-view mirror. He pressed against the side of the car. The truck bed was at chest height. He heard rock music coming from inside the cabin. Metallica's "Enter Sandman." The volume was moderate. Reacher moved up to the driver's door. The mercenary inside was lowering the window just a crack to flick away his cigarette. Smoke billowed out, immediately torn apart by the wind. He was staring intently at the front door of the diner, unaware that his prey was right beside him. Reacher stood up from his crouched position. His shadow fell over the car window. The soldier jumped and turned. He saw a massive black shape blocking out all the light. Reacher did not knock on the door. He slipped his large fingers into the gap of the car window. The soldier reacted. He pressed the button to raise the window. The tempered glass pressed tightly against Reacher's fingers. The electric motor whined. Reacher did not withdraw his hand. He used pure mechanical force. The muscles in his forearm and shoulder exerted power. He yanked the glass outwards. Crack! The sound of shattering glass mingled with the screech of the bent metal frame. Safety glass shards fell in a shower onto the driver's lap. He screamed, his right hand fumbling down to the passenger seat for the MP5. Reacher reached in, grabbing the collar of the soldier's jacket. He pulled him out through the shattered window, as if pulling a rabbit from its burrow. The soldier weighed about 180 pounds. He flew through the car door, landing heavily in the cold snow. His gun and knife were still inside the car. He scrambled to get up, pulling a tactical knife from his boot. The blade was 6 inches long, made of dull black carbon steel. Reacher stepped forward. He did not brace himself. He simply advanced. The soldier lunged, a stab aimed at his lower abdomen. Fast, speed, Krav Maga technique. Reacher did not retreat. He turned his left hip at a 15-degree angle. The blade slid past his canvas jacket, merely slicing through an outer layer of fabric. At the same time Reacher struck. He did not use his fist. He used his forehead. The famous headbutt, the thickest and hardest bone of the skull, collided directly with the soft T-zone of the opponent's face. Thud, a dull and wet sound. Like a sledgehammer hitting a watermelon wrapped in a wet towel, the soldier's nose shattered. Fragments of cartilage shot back into his eye socket. Blood sprayed out like a fountain, staining the white snow red. The soldier fell backward, the knife flying from his hand. He lay writhing, clutching his face, making gurgling sounds of pain as blood flowed back down his trachea. He had been taken out of the fight. His central nervous system was temporarily shocked. Reacher bent down. He picked up the knife. Good balance. The handle was wrapped in non-slip rubber. He tucked it into his jacket pocket. He grabbed the soldier by the collar, dragging him toward the curb, pushing him into a high pile of snow to avoid being seen from afar. The soldier opened one eye, the other swollen shut. He looked at Reacher. In that gaze there was no longer aggression, only primal terror remained. He saw a monster devoid of emotion, hesitation, and compassion. "Stay here," Reacher said. "The snow will stop the bleeding for you." Reacher returned to the car. He opened the door, sweeping away the broken glass on the driver's seat. He adjusted the rearview mirror. He drove the vehicle back to where Mary Ellen was standing. The window rolled down. Mary Ellen looked at Reacher, then at the blood on the snow in the distance. She did not ask what had happened. She knew. She saw the tear in Reacher's shirt and the blood speckled on his forehead, the blood of another. She opened the door and climbed into the car. She sat pressed against the passenger door, trying to keep as much distance as possible from Reacher. She was afraid of the enemy, but she was also beginning to fear the man who was protecting her. "To the quarry," Reacher said. He shifted gears. The Dodge Ram roared. The 6.7-liter Cummins turbo diesel engine provided 850 pound-feet of torque, enough power to plow through any obstacle. Reacher drove onto the main road. He did not turn on the headlights. He drove by the light reflected from the snow and his memory of the topographical map. The clock in his head reported 12:15. Beside him, Mary Ellen was still shivering. She stole glances at Reacher. His face in the dim light looked like it was carved from granite, silent, cold. "You are not human," she whispered, her voice drowned out by the engine noise. Reacher heard. He did not respond. He focused on the slippery road ahead. The slope began to rise at 15 degrees. They were entering the tiger's den, and Reacher had just broken one of its fangs. James Moore stood before the 2-inch thick bulletproof glass wall of the executive office. Outside, the blizzard was assaulting the Sangre de Cristo Mountains with winds gusting at 7. Inside, the air was still filtered of dust and maintained at 45% humidity. 68 degrees Fahrenheit, perfect for preserving sensitive electronic equipment and expensive Bordeaux wine bottles. He did not look at the blizzard. He looked at the 60-inch LCD screen mounted on the opposite wall. The real-time monitoring system, 16 squares of camera feeds. 12 squares were filled with white noise from the storm. The remaining 4 displayed the pitch-black blind spots of the mine. The mahogany door opened. There was no knock. Only Walker dared to enter like that. Moore did not turn around. He looked at Walker's reflection on the dark glass. The head of security did not look like someone who had just gone to intimidate a drifter. He looked like someone who had just survived a fierce combat zone. "Report," Moore said. His voice was flat, emotionless, like the hum of a server hard drive. Walker approached the desk, pouring a glass of water from a crystal pitcher. His hand trembled slightly. A micro tremor, but to Moore it was as clear as a crack in a hydroelectric dam. "We lost Unit 4, Walker said, downing the glass of water. "Found him in the snow at the side of Route 40. Unconscious. Shock trauma. Is he dead? Not yet, but his face is smashed. The nasal bones shattered into his frontal sinus. The eye sockets cracked like a spider web. The doctor said the impact was equivalent to being hit in the face with an 8-pound sledgehammer at 30 miles per hour. Moore turned around. He adjusted the cufflink of his real gold vest. "Weapon, no weapon." Walker set the glass down, the sound of glass clinking echoing in the closed room. "No traces of gunpowder, no knife marks." He used his head, a headbutt. "Unit 4 is a former Marine black belt in jiu-jitsu." He was taken down in less than a second. Moore walked to the desk, opening the laptop. He typed in the password. A random string of 16 characters. What did he take? The Dodge Ram 3500. Unit 4 used it to set up a roadblock. Moore typed. A satellite map of the Highgate area appeared. A red dot blinked against the gray of the rocky terrain. The GPS signal from the Dodge Ram. A 2-second signal delay. Position error under 3 meters. Moore looked at the red dot. He waited for it to move south onto the highway, fleeing from the storm and the pursuit. That was the logical reaction of a normal person when poking a hornet's nest. Run away to save one's life. But the red dot did not go down. It was moving up. It was crawling along the eastern trail, skirting the sheer cliff, heading straight into the heart of the mine. Moore stopped typing. He stared at the screen. "He's coming," Moore said. Walker stepped forward, looking at the screen. His breath caught. The madman Walker whispered, "What is he planning? To crash into a stone wall?" "He's not mad," Moore said. He began calculating. He disabled the cameras with the snowstorm. He removed the blockade. He stole a heavy-duty vehicle capable of traversing the terrain, and he is going against all our tactical predictions. Moore zoomed in on the map. He knows, Moore said. He knows we are not mining stone. Walker drew his Sig Sauer, checking the magazine. 15 rounds. I will gather Team Alpha, Walker said. 6 shooters, AR-15 rifles. We will intercept him at Gate 2. No, Moore raised his hand to stop him. Don't use rifles. The loud noise will attract attention if the wind shifts. Use MP5s with suppressors and position snipers on the stone-crushing tower. In a snowstorm like this, he sees us, Moore said, his voice cold. He sees things that the police, environmental, inspectors, and even you cannot see. He sees the discrepancies in the records. He sees the fear of the woman in the diner. Moore walked over to the window. He looked down at the large yard below where the box trucks were lined up, waiting to be dispatched. Inside those containers was not limestone, it was gold. 2 tons of uranium, 235 inches raw powder form, worth $40 million on the international black market. Who is he? Walker asked. The question hung in the air. I couldn't find any records, Moore said. No fingerprints, no facial recognition in the FBI database, no credit history, no home address. He is a ghost, a glitch in the system. Moore turned back, looking straight into Walker's eyes. For the first time, Walker saw a glimmer of unease in his boss's eyes. Not fear, but the discomfort of a mathematician encountering an unsolvable variable. He is not police, Moore concluded. Police have procedures. Police need warrants. Police call for backup. He pointed at the red dot on the screen. The red dot had passed the old transformer station. He is a predator, Moore said, and he is hungry. The office door shook slightly as a strong gust hit the building. Activate red-level security protocol, Moore ordered. Lock the centrifuge doors. Increase the fence voltage to 10,000 volts. And Walker stood at attention. Don't try to capture him. If you see him, shoot for the head. Don't shoot at the body. He is big enough to absorb 3 9mm rounds and still snap your neck before dying. Walker nodded, turning to step outside. Moore remained alone in the cold office. He watched the red dot inch forward on the screen. The remaining distance 2 miles, estimated time of approach 10 minutes. Moore opened the desk drawer. Next to the thick financial files was a Ruger Super Red Hawk revolver. A caliber of .44 Magnum. A monster made of chrome-plated steel. He placed the gun on the glass table. The game is over. The war begins. The Dodge Ram roared as Reacher pressed the gas, pushing the engine speed up to 2,500 revolutions per minute. The rear wheels slid slightly on the black ice before the anti-slip differential locked hard, regaining traction. Reacher steered against the slide. A reflex action. Mary Ellen clung tightly to the handle of the car's ceiling. Her knuckles turned white against the gray plastic background. Her breath condensed into a fog on the window glass. "Where are we going?" she asked. Her voice was swallowed by the engine noise. "The substation," Reacher said. "It's abandoned. I told you. There has never been anything abandoned that was protected by a triple-layer B-40 fence," Reacher said. He turned off the headlights. Darkness fell like a lead blanket. He drove by the dim light reflected from the snow and the memory of the topographic map in his head. The trail sloped at 12 degrees, just wide enough for a vehicle. On the left was a sheer rock face. On the right was a 300-foot drop. Reacher stopped the car 500 yards from the substation. He turned off the engine. Silence returned, torn apart by the sound of the wind howling through the canyons. But beneath the wind's noise, Reacher heard another sound. Ooh! A low frequency, steady, 60 hertz. "Get out," Reacher said. They stepped into the snow. The cold wind whipped against their faces. Mary Ellen huddled in her thin coat. She looked at Reacher, waiting for a command or an explanation. Reacher pointed to the sky. In the blizzard night, the high-voltage power lines overhead were no longer invisible. They emitted a pale blue glow, a corona discharge phenomenon. It occurs when the air surrounding the conductors is ionized by extremely high voltage. "Ozone smell," Reacher said. He inhaled the metallic scent of molten metal and burnt air. "I don't smell anything," Mary Ellen said, her teeth chattering. 115 kilovolts, Reacher said. Enough to light up the city of Denver. A limestone quarry doesn't need that kind of power. A three-phase 480-volt rock crusher operates on much less. James Moore is consuming electricity equivalent to an aluminum smelter. They moved toward the fence. Reacher stopped at the edge of the pine forest. In front of them was the substation, not abandoned at all. 3 gigantic transformers, the size of 2-story buildings, were operating at full capacity. Cooling oil in the radiators was boiling vigorously. And next to the substation, a 10-foot diameter concrete ventilation pipe rose from the ground, spewing hot air that melted the snow within a radius of 20 yards. Reacher observed the airflow, colorless, but it distorted the air around it, like asphalt on a summer noon. "What are they doing down there?" Mary Ellen asked. She stood huddled behind Reacher, using his body as a windshield. "Enriching," Reacher said. He stepped closer to the ventilation pipe. The heat wafted against his face. Natural uranium contains 99.3% of the U-238 isotope and only 0.7% of U-235. Reacher said, his voice flat, as if reading specifications. To use it for reactors or weapons, the U-235 ratio needs to be increased. That process is called enrichment. He pointed to the dull thrum of noise rising from the depths of the earth. Gas centrifuges. Thousands of them in succession. They spin at supersonic speeds to separate isotopes based on atomic weight. They need electricity, a lot of electricity, and they generate a lot of heat. Mary Ellen stepped back. She looked at that dark hole as if gazing into the mouth of hell. "Nuclear weapons," she whispered, "or fuel. In the black market, that line doesn't exist." Reacher turned his back to the ventilation shaft. He looked toward the main workshop of the quarry, which was a mile to the north. The headlights flickered. "Frank was right," Reacher said. "The trucks are leaving empty because they aren't carrying stone. They come to pick up cargo, small barrels, heavy, containing uranium hexafluoride." Suddenly, Mary Ellen clutched Reacher's arm. Her nails dug deep into the fabric of his jacket. "Look," she said, her voice choked. From the main gate of the quarry, a convoy began to move out. Not dump trucks, container trucks. 3 of them. Jet black, no logos, no license plates. Leading and trailing were 2 armored SUVs like walkers. "They are evacuating," Reacher said. "Moore knows we are here. He is covering up the evidence. We need to call the police, the FBI, someone." Reacher shook his head. "Not in time. By the time the FBI gets here with a search warrant, this place will just be an ordinary limestone quarry. Moore will seal the entrances to the underground. He will erase all traces of radiation with acid." He watched the convoy crawling down the slope like a giant snake. "We have to stop it." "How? We only have 1 truck and a knife." Reacher looked at Mary Ellen. She was trembling not just from the cold. She was facing the truth that her husband was killed, not for a petty embezzlement, but for a geopolitical secret. Her fear had transformed. It was no longer panic. It was despair. "Do you know how to drive a manual?" Reacher asked. Mary Ellen nodded. "Frank taught me how to drive an old truck." Reacher pulled the keys to the Dodge Ram from his jacket pocket. He placed them in her hand. The cold metal transferred from his hand to hers. "Drive this vehicle down the main road," Reacher said. "Turn on the headlights. Honk the horn. Make as much noise as possible. Draw the attention of the 2 security vehicles." "What about you, Reacher?" Look toward the abandoned railroad tracks running parallel to the trail leading straight into the mountain. "I will take a shortcut," Reacher said. "I need to borrow some explosives." Explosives. Every quarry has a supply of explosives. ANFO. Ammonium nitrate mixed with diesel, used for blasting rock. Mary Ellen looked at him, her eyes wide with horror. "Are you planning to blow up this entire mountain?" "Only the necessary parts," Reacher replied. He turned around, starting to run towards the fence of the mining area. His long stride stretched wide across the snow. He did not look back. Mary Ellen stood there alone beside the rumbling transformer. She clutched the car key tightly. She watched Reacher's massive silhouette fade into the night. She knew he was not a hero. He was a natural disaster descending upon James Moore. She climbed into the car. She inserted the key into the ignition. The clock on the dashboard read 12:45. The hunt was entering its lethal phase. The stash of explosives was isolated to the west, nestled at the foot of a sheer granite cliff. A basic safety rule in mining. If it exploded, the blast would be contained by the cliff and directed skyward, minimizing damage to the main facility. Reacher approached the target. He moved against the wind. The snow was falling thick enough that he did not need to worry about the sound of his footsteps. The storage door was made of half-inch thick, reinforced steel. The exterior lock was a Master Lock Pro Series 6321. The shackle was made of boron alloy, cut-resistant and drill-resistant. Reacher did not have bolt cutters. He also did not have time to pick the lock. He looked around. A 5-foot-long old railroad rail lay buried in the snow nearby, rusted and heavy. Reacher lifted it. 120 pounds of solid steel. He wedged the end of the rail into the gap between the shackle and the door frame. The principle of the lever Archimedes. With a 5-foot-long lever arm and the weight of his 250-pound body, Reacher generated enough torque to break anything. He took a deep breath, held it, then yanked hard. Crack! It was not the shackle that broke. The door frame burst free from the steel casing. The rusted weld could not withstand the brutal physical force. Reacher tossed the rail into the snow. He opened the door. The smell of ammonium nitrate hit his nose. The pungent, acrid scent, reminiscent of old urine mixed with damp earth. Inside was pitch dark. Reacher did not turn on the light. He let his eyes adjust to the darkness. 2 minutes later, shapes began to emerge. Bags stacked high to the ceiling. The packaging bore the words, ammonium nitrate, 3400. Industrial fertilizer, granular form. In the corner of the room were red diesel drums, the basic components of ANFO, 94% granular ammonium nitrate, mixed with 6% fuel oil, a stable, inexpensive, and moderately powerful explosive. To detonate it, a strong shock wave was needed. Reacher walked to the wall-mounted safe. The safe contained the detonators. It was locked with a mechanical combination. Reacher pressed his ear against the safe door. He turned the dial. Slowly. Click, click, clunk. The sound of the lock's tumblers falling into place echoed clearly in the stillness. An old skill from his days as a military investigator. The standard locks in the quarry rarely had their codes changed. The safe door swung open. Inside were boxes of electric detonators and slow-burning fuse wire. Reacher took 2 rolls of orange fuse wire. The burn rate was 40 seconds per foot. He also grabbed a box of number 8 detonators. He pulled a 50-pound bag of ammonium nitrate out onto the floor. He used a knife to cut open the bag. The cloudy white granules spilled out. He poured diesel directly into the bag. He mixed it thoroughly with his hands. The oil soaked into the granules, turning them into a light pink mass. Now, it was no longer fertilizer. It was 22 pounds of powerful explosive. Reacher inserted a detonator into the center of the explosive mass. He connected the fuse wire. He cut a length of wire 12 inches long. 40 seconds. Suddenly, the horn of a Dodge Ram blared from the main road. Beep, beep. The siren blared, piercing the quiet night. Mary Ellen had begun. Reacher stood up, slinging the bag of explosives over his shoulder. 50 pounds felt light on him. He stepped out of the storage room, looking down into the valley. The Dodge Ram was racing down the slope at 60 miles per hour. The headlights blazed brightly, shining directly into the main gate of the mine. Mary Ellen was honking continuously. She was doing exactly what he had instructed, creating noise, drawing attention. From the guard gate, 2 armored SUVs immediately turned around. The red and blue flashing lights on the rooftops lit up. Shadows jumped out of the vehicles, forming a line. Bang, 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 the sound of gunfire. Reacher squinted. He saw the sparks from the gun barrels flashing from the concealed positions behind the concrete block. They were not firing warning shots. They were shooting directly at the truck's cabin. The windshield of the Dodge Ram shattered, but the vehicle did not stop. It barreled straight into the barrier gate. Crash. The steel barrier was hurled into the air. The heavy truck plowed through the guard booth, crashing into the courtyard and slamming into a pile of gravel. The engine fell silent. Smoke billowed thickly from the hood. The gunfire ceased abruptly. Walker emerged from the lead SUV. He held an MP5 approaching the crumpled truck. He signaled for the soldiers to surround it. Reacher observed from 300 feet above. He did not blink. His heart rate remained steady at 55. The door of the Dodge Ram swung open. Mary Ellen tumbled to the ground. She could not get up. She crawled on the snow, stained with machine oil and blood. Walker stepped forward. He did not help her up. He kicked her hard in the side. Mary Ellen curled up. Walker bent down, grabbing her hair and yanking it back. He pressed the barrel of the gun against her temple. He shouted something, but it was too far for Reacher to hear. He was looking for Reacher. He thought Reacher was hiding in the truck bed. Two soldiers ran to the back of the truck, tearing off the tarp covering the bed, empty. Walker looked up, scanning the darkness enveloping the mountain. He realized he had been deceived. The prey was not in the trap. The prey was outside in the shadows watching him. He raised the gun's butt and struck Mary Ellen hard in the face. She collapsed motionless. Walker did not kill her. He signaled to the two soldiers. They hoisted her up under her arms, dragging her towards the central building where the enormous ventilation shaft was located. Reacher watched the scene. He did not feel anger. Anger was a waste of energy. It clouded judgment and made hands tremble. Instead, he felt an absolute coldness spreading in his chest, like opening the door to a freezer, a confirmation. Previously, this was an investigative mission, an effort to prevent. Now it was an execution. Reacher looked at the watch in his mind. 1 hour and 15 minutes past midnight. He pulled out his Zippo lighter, checking the flame once more. The fuel was full. The flint was good. He shouldered the bag of explosives and began to run downhill. He did not run toward the main gate. He ran toward the abandoned tracks leading into the mountain. Mary Ellen was the anchor. Walker was using her as a hostage to lure him out. He would take her down into the underground. He would torture her to vent his anger. Reacher would not negotiate. He would not surrender. He would bring the roof down on their heads. He reached the entrance of the railway tunnel. A steel barrier sealed off the entrance. Above it was a sign, "Danger, abandoned mine, no entry." Reacher placed the ANFO bag at the foot of the barrier. He wedged it into the gap between the steel bars, pressing it tightly against the limestone wall, the weakest load-bearing position. He lit the fuse. The end of the fuse whistled, sparking bright orange flames beginning to eat into the black powder core. Reacher stepped back. He ran toward a large rock 50 yards away, crouched down, covered his ears, and opened his mouth to equalize the pressure. 40 seconds. He counted down in his head. 39, 38. Below in the valley, Walker had dragged Mary Ellen behind the steel door of the central building. He thought he was safe in his fortress. He did not know that Reacher did not need a key to enter. 15, 14. Reacher looked up at the pitch-black sky. The blizzard was still howling, but another storm much more violent was about to come. 3, 2, 1. Boom! The ground trembled. A column of yellow-orange fire erupted from the railway tunnel, tearing through the night. The shock waves swept through the valley, blowing away the layer of snow covering the mountainside. The steel barrier was torn apart like scrap paper. The rock face around the tunnel entrance collapsed, creating a small rock slide. But more importantly, the explosion echoed through the tunnel system like the roar of a dragon being awakened. It traveled along the tracks straight into the heart of the mountain, where the centrifuges were spinning at supersonic speeds. Inside the central building, the lights went out. The alarm system blared. Reacher stood up. He brushed the snow off his shoulders. The entrance was open. He drew the tactical knife from his pocket. The blade was matte black, reflecting no light. Reacher stepped into the thick cloud of dust. No more reconnaissance, no more damage assessment. Only corpses remained. The limestone dust hung in the air like thick fog. Visibility dropped to 5 meters. The smell of ANFO explosives had faded, giving way to the acrid scent of burnt earth and heated metal. Reacher walked through the rubble of the tunnel entrance. He did not cough. His lungs filtered the air automatically. breathing shallow and steady to limit inhalation of silica dust. The tunnel is 12 feet wide and 10 feet high. The rough rock walls are reinforced with new sturdy I-beams. Above, explosion-proof lights emit a sickly yellow glow. Reacher presses against the tunnel wall. He moves into the darkness between two lights. Ahead, 20 yards away, a fireproof steel door is tightly closed. Next to the door is a small guard post. A soldier stands there holding a radio, coughing heavily due to the dust. He wears safety goggles but no gas mask, a mistake. He is busy shouting into the radio, trying to communicate with the command center through the interference caused by the explosion. Reacher pulls out his tactical knife. He does not run. He glides. The rubber soles of his shoes lightly roll on the gravel floor. The soldier has his back to Reacher. He is staring intently at the steel door, his hand repeatedly tapping on the broken electronic panel. Reacher approaches him from behind, an arm's length away. He does not use the knife. He needs information, and he needs a loudspeaker. Reacher's left arm wraps around the soldier's neck, locking his trachea. His right hand grips the soldier's gun-holding wrist, twisting it backward. Crack! The shoulder joint dislocates. The soldier opens his mouth to scream, but his larynx is compressed. No sound escapes except for the weak hiss of trapped air. Reacher tightens his grip a little more. Blood stops flowing to the brain. 10 seconds later, the soldier goes limp. Reacher drops him to the ground. He disarms him, a Glock 19. He removes the magazine and tosses the gun into the darkness. He does not need a pistol. He needs the radio. It is a Motorola XTS 5000, a digital encryption model used by the military. Reacher takes it off the soldier's belt. He looks at the frequency displayed on the small green LCD screen. Channel 1, command channel. He picks up the earpiece and presses it to his ear. Report. Tunnel gate number 3 has lost signal. Report. Walker's voice growls in the earpiece. Reacher presses the push-to-talk button. He waits a second for the line to fully open. Walker. Reacher says. His voice is low, calm, cutting through the static like a steel drill. The other end goes silent. The silence lasts 3 seconds. Who are you? Walker asks. His voice is lowered, cautious. I am the one who just turned off your fan, Reacher says. In the reinforced glass control room, James Moore grabs the radio on the table. He stares at the device as if it were a venomous snake. What do you want? Moore interjects. Moore. Reacher recognizes the voice. Flat. Mathematica. I want you to do a calculation. Reacher leans back against the cold tunnel wall. He watches the steel door shaking violently. On the other side of the door is the centrifuge system. The Zipper-type gas centrifuge spins at 90,000 revolutions per minute, Reacher says. Air friction and magnetic fields generate enormous heat. You need a water cooling system and forced ventilation to keep the temperature below the critical threshold. I have a backup system, Moore says. His voice remains firm, but Reacher hears a slight tremor at the end of the sentence. The frequency of his vocal cords fluctuates as the body releases cortisol. Your backup system draws power from the old transformer station, Reacher says. I cut that line 15 minutes before I blew the tunnel door. The recent explosion was not to clear a path. It was to collapse the main ventilation duct. Reacher pauses. He lets the information sink in. Basic thermodynamics. Moore. Closed system. Continuous heat source. No heat dissipation. The temperature inside the tunnel is rising exponentially. 20 degrees per minute. You are talking nonsense, Moore shouted. The temperature sensor is still reporting normal. Your sensor is placed at the air intake. Reacher lied. Or told the truth. Moore couldn't know. The air intake has been blocked by 500 tons of limestone. You are looking at dead data. Reacher looked at the clock in his head. 1 hour and 25 minutes. When the temperature reaches 300 degrees Celsius, uranium hexafluoride will change phase. The pressure in the spinning tubes will exceed the material strength limit of maraging aluminum alloy. A detonation will create a chain reaction. You are in there too, Moore said. You will die as well. I am standing in the pressure buffer, Reacher said. I have 5 minutes to walk out. But you, Moore, you are sitting on a $40 million dirty bomb. What do you want? Moore yelled. This time he lost control. The arrogance of someone wielding life and death had been shattered by the laws of physics. Let the girl go, Reacher said. If I let her go, will you stop? No, Reacher said. If you let her go, I will give you a quick death. A bullet or a broken neck. Quick and clean. No pain. Silence enveloped the communication channel. What if not? Walker asked. If not, Reacher said, his voice dropping 10 degrees colder. I will let physics do its work. I will block the last vent. You will die of acute radiation poisoning while your flesh melts from the reactor's temperature. You will wish you had died like the soldier at Gate 3. Reacher released the push-to-talk button. He didn't need to hear the answer. He knew what Moore was doing. He was looking at the bright red warning screens. He was seeing the temperature rise. He was a mathematician. He knew the odds, and he knew Reacher was not joking. The steel door in front of Reacher groaned. The metal began to expand due to heat. The paint on the surface of the door started to peel and bubble. Reacher stepped back. He had sown fear into their minds. Now he would turn that fear into reality. He turned to the soldier lying unconscious. He searched his pockets and found a security key card. Reacher scanned the card on the reader by the door. Beep! The green light lit up. The magnetic lock opened. The pressure difference caused the door to burst open. A blast of hot air rushed into Reacher's face, accompanied by the piercing whine of thousands of centrifuges spinning in their death throes. Reacher stepped inside. He was not running away. He was hunting. The steel door slammed shut behind Reacher. The magnetic latch locked tight. The space inside the vast centrifuge hall was as large as an airplane hangar. The ceiling was 30 feet high, crisscrossed with air ducts and electrical cables. Below, thousands of cylindrical centrifuges made of aluminum alloy were lined up in straight rows extending to the horizon. They resembled a forest of metallic bamboo, shiny and cold. But the air was not cold. The ambient temperature was at 120 degrees Fahrenheit and rising every second. The cooling system had failed. The air was heated by the friction of thousands of rotors spinning at supersonic speeds. The noise was the first thing to assault Reacher. A piercing high-frequency whine continuously drilling into his eardrum, the sound of extreme physical stress. Reacher walked between the rows of centrifuges. He moved into the blind spot of the surveillance cameras mounted on the ceiling. The clock in his mind showed 1:30 in the morning. He sensed a change in the air. The humidity dropped to nearly zero. The sweat on his skin evaporated immediately, leaving a thin layer of salt. Reacher stopped at the third intersection of the rows of machines. He saw the target. In the center of the main hall, an elevated control podium stood isolated, surrounded by steel railings. Mary Ellen was tied to the railing. Her head hung down. Blood flowed from a cut on her forehead into her eyes, mingling with sweat. Walker stood there. He was no longer wearing a parka. He had removed the outer layer, leaving only a soaked tactical shirt and Kevlar armor. He held an MP5, the barrel aimed at Mary Ellen's head. But Walker did not look at Reacher. He stared at the pressure gauge on the control podium. The needle was shaking violently in the red zone. "Come out!" Reacher Walker shouted. His voice was half swallowed by the noise of the machine, sounding distorted and desperate. "I know you're there. I see you on the thermal sensor." Reacher did not step out. He stood still behind a 6-foot-tall centrifuge. The machine's casing was scorching hot. He could feel the heat radiating through the canvas coat. He observed Walker was not alone. The other 4 soldiers from Team Alpha were hiding. Reacher could not see them, but he knew they were there. He scanned the shiny metal surfaces of the opposite rows of machines. Reflections. A streak of black moved across the curved aluminum casing of centrifuge number 402. A barrel protruded from behind machine number 518. An L-shaped formation, a classic ambush tactic. 2 men on the left flank, 2 men on the right flank. Walker was the bait in the middle, a crossfire trap. If Reacher stepped into the open area in front of the control podium, he would be torn apart by 4 streams of bullets from both sides. Reacher calculated. The distance to the control podium was 20 yards. The distance to the nearest soldier was 10 yards. He had no gun. He only had a knife and knowledge of physics. "Are you hot, Walker?" Reacher said loudly. He did not shout. He used his diaphragm to project the sound deep and resonant, cutting through the high-frequency noise. Walker jerked around, trying to locate the voice. He swept his gun back and forth between the rows of machines. "Show yourself, you bastard! Kevlar is an excellent insulator," Reacher called out from the shadows. "It keeps your body heat trapped inside. Your heart rate is rising. Your blood vessels are dilating. Your eyes are stinging from sweat. You are rapidly dehydrating." Walker wiped sweat from his forehead with his left hand. He squinted. Reacher was right. He was being cooked in his own armor. "I have a hostage!" Walker yelled. He shook Mary Ellen awake. She groaned in pain. "I will blow this girl's brains out if you don't surrender." "You won't shoot," Reacher said, "because if you shoot, you will blow this whole room up." Reacher reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy steel bolt he had picked up at the entrance of the tunnel. Uranium hexafluoride in gaseous form is very unstable. Reacher continued his psychological assault. The pressure in the spinning tubes is at 300 atmospheres. A stray bullet, a tiny crack, and boom, a chain reaction. Not a nuclear explosion, but a superheated steam explosion mixed with acid. He threw the bolt, not thrown towards Walker. He threw it at the casing of centrifuge number 305, 3 meters away from the soldier on the right flank. Clang! The sound of metal clashing rang out sharply. The soldier on the right flank flinched, an involuntary reflex. He swung his gun toward the noise and pulled the trigger. Bang! Bang! 2 9mm bullets lodged into the casing of the centrifuge. The aluminum casing was torn apart. UF6 gas, compressed at extremely high pressure, escaped outside. A terrifying shriek echoed 10 times louder than the background noise. A jet of opaque white gas erupted from the bullet hole, cold and deadly. It met the moisture in the air and instantly transformed into hydrofluoric acid in mist form. "Don't shoot!" Walker shouted, but it was too late. The machine was thrown off balance. The rotor inside, spinning at 90,000 revolutions per minute, began to collide with the partition. Bang! 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 The entire row of machines shook. Machine number 305 was ripped from its concrete base. It flew out like a giant spinning top gone mad, knocking down the soldier who had just fired. The soldier screamed as the half-ton block of metal crushed his chest. Acid sprayed directly into his face. The scream faded, replaced by the sizzling sound of flesh being corroded. The domino effect began. Machine 305 collided with Machine 306. Machine 306 struck Machine 307. The system was self-destructing. Reacher did not wait. He dashed out from his hiding spot. The 3 remaining soldiers were in a panic. They did not know whether to shoot Reacher or flee from the spreading cloud of acid. Reacher ran toward the soldier on the left. He was standing, frozen eyes wide behind his protective goggles. Reacher did not slow down. He used his left shoulder to ram straight into the soldier's chest. The impact force of 250 pounds, moving at 15 miles per hour. The soldier flew backward, slamming his back against the shaking row of machines. The gun flew from his hand. He slid to the ground, shattered ribs piercing his lungs. Reacher did not stop to finish him off. He continued running toward the control platform. Walker had seen him. He aimed his gun at Reacher, but his hand was slippery with sweat, and the floor was shaking violently, causing him to lose his balance. He pulled the trigger. The bullet plowed into the steel floor beneath Reacher's feet. Reacher jumped up the stairs leading to the platform, 3 steps in one bound. Walker released Mary Ellen, switching to hold the gun with both hands. He steadied his aim. Reacher saw Walker's index finger tighten. He could not evade. The distance was too close. Reacher did the only thing he could. He threw himself forward, sliding across the slick steel floor, heading straight for Walker's legs. Bang! The bullet grazed Reacher's left shoulder. The jacket was torn apart, a burning streak on his flesh. Reacher collided with Walker's arm. The sound of the arm bone snapping was crisp. Walker fell face down on the floor. The MP5 flew away, landing on the concrete floor where the acid cloud was swirling. Reacher stood up. His left shoulder throbbed with pain, but his arm still functioned well. He grabbed Walker by the collar of his vest, lifting him up. Walker screamed, his right leg dangling unnaturally. He punched Reacher in the face. The punches were weak from a man who had already been defeated. Reacher headbutted him for the second time that night. Walker's nose collapsed. Blood gushed out. He went limp in Reacher's hands. Reacher threw him aside. He turned to Mary Ellen. She was huddled in the corner of the railing, eyes tightly shut, mumbling prayers. She was not further injured, but her spirit had completely shattered in the face of the hellish scene around her. Reacher pulled out a knife and cut the ropes binding her. "Let's go," Reacher said. His voice was calm, to the point of being absurd, amidst the roaring metal and the hissing acid. "We're going to die," Mary Ellen cried. "It's going to explode." Reacher pulled her to her feet. He looked down at the lobby. The acid cloud had covered 1/3 of the floor area. The two remaining soldiers were trying to run towards the emergency exit, but the door was jammed due to thermal deformation. They banged on the door in desperation. "It won't explode right away," Reacher said. "The centrifugal machine is designed to break apart locally, not to explode simultaneously. We have 3 minutes before the acid concentration reaches lethal levels at this altitude." He looked up at the ceiling. The escape was not through the entrance. The escape was above. A technical staircase led up to the crane beam running along the ceiling, and at the end of the crane rail was a rooftop ventilation opening. "Climb up," Reacher pointed. Mary Ellen looked at the vertical iron staircase shaking violently to the rhythm of the deadly machines below. "I can't do it," she shook her head. Reacher grasped her shoulder. His hand was large, warm, and steady. He did not comfort her. He imparted physical motivation. "You climb up, or you stay here and melt with Walker. Choose." Mary Ellen looked into Reacher's eyes. She saw life, an intense, resilient, and relentless life. She nodded. She grasped the handrail of the staircase. Reacher followed her, using his body as a shield in case any metal fragments flew towards them. They began to climb up, leaving behind the hall that was turning into a chemical slaughterhouse. Below, Walker was struggling to crawl towards the nearby fallen backup pistol. He was coughing violently. Acid was starting to corrode his lung lining. He looked up and saw Reacher's figure fading away above. He knew he had lost, not because of the bullets, but because he had wagered against a natural force he did not understand. Reacher climbed to the last step. He pushed open the vent cover. Cold wind rushed in. The snowstorm had not yet subsided. They had escaped the temperature trap, but they were still on top of a volcano about to erupt. And James Moore was still alive. Reacher and Mary Ellen lay flat on the roof of the central building. The wind was gusting at 9 on the Beaufort scale. The snowstorm lashed against their faces like shards of broken glass. Beneath them, the building was shaking violently. Small explosions echoed continuously. It was the sound of metal breaking, the explosions of overloaded capacitors, and the collapse of concrete structures. The clock in Reacher's mind read 1 hour and 40 minutes past midnight. "Is it about to blow?" Mary Ellen shouted, her voice lost in the wind. Reacher shook his head. "It won't blow up into the sky," he said. "It will collapse inward. The effect, this roof will fall down." He looked around. The central building was 50 yards from the cliff behind. But between the roof and the cliff was an old rusty conveyor system stretching across the deep chasm. "We have to get across," Reacher pointed towards the conveyor. Mary Ellen looked at the flimsy steel frame swaying in the storm. "You're crazy. It will break. It can hold 2 tons of rock," Reacher said. "The two of us together weigh just over 300 pounds. He pulled her to her feet. They ran towards the conveyor's end. The roof began to warp beneath their feet. The temperature below had reached the melting point of structural steel. Reacher stepped onto the rubber conveyor. It was slippery with ice and snow. He held onto the rusty railing, moving step by step away from the roof. Mary Ellen followed him. She dared not look down. Below was the dark abyss of the warehouse yard where trucks were ablaze. They had made it halfway. Boom! A loud explosion from inside the building. The roof collapsed. A massive column of dust rose up, engulfing the spot where they had just stood. The steel frame of the conveyor shook violently. The joints creaked. Reacher gripped Mary Ellen's hand tightly. He pulled her to run. No more caution. No more one step at a time. They jumped over the missing sections of the steel mesh floor, feet treading on air, hands grabbing onto anything that could bear their weight. They landed on the other side of the cliff just as the entire central building collapsed completely. It was like a giant monster kneeling down to die. The concrete walls crashed inward. Dust and smoke obscured everything. The light from the fire below illuminated the night, painting it red. Reacher and Mary Ellen lay panting on the cold snow. They were safe, but their work was not done yet. Reacher stood up. He brushed the snow off his coat. "Where is James Moore?" Mary Ellen asked. Reacher looked towards the operations building 200 yards away. It was a glass structure elevated, overseeing the entire mining area. It was still intact. The lights were still on. "He is in his ivory tower," Reacher said, watching his kingdom fall apart. Reacher began to walk towards it. "What are you going to do?" "Finish it," Reacher said. He did not run. He walked. Long, steady strides. He reached the front door of the operations building. The tempered glass door was locked tight. Inside, James Moore stood holding a Ruger Super Red Hawk. He aimed the gun at the door. Reacher did not break the door. He picked up a rock the size of his fist. He threw it at the glass. Thud. The rock bounced off. The tempered glass did not shatter. Moore inside smirked. He pulled the trigger. Bang. The .44 Magnum bullet pierced through the glass, leaving a small hole, then lodged into the snow a meter away from Reacher's feet. Reacher did not back down. He knew the properties of tempered glass. It could withstand surface pressure very well, but it was weak at the edges and corners, and when it was pierced, the internal stress structure would be compromised. He picked up another rock. This time, he threw it at the bottom right corner of the glass. Crack. The entire pane shattered into 1,000 tiny pieces like corn kernels. Moore's protective barrier collapsed. Cold wind rushed into the warm office. Moore stepped back. He fired a second shot. The bullet missed. His hand was shaking too much. Reacher stepped through the broken frame. The soles of his shoes crunched on the glass shards. Moore fired a third shot. The bullet grazed Reacher's side. Reacher did not stop. He moved towards the desk. Moore fired a fourth shot. Click. The bullet misfired, or he miscounted the number of shots he had fired. He threw the gun at Reacher's face. Reacher tilted his head to dodge it easily. Moore backed up until his back hit the glass window behind him. He looked down into the 300 feet deep abyss below. "I have money," Moore said quickly. "A lot of money. $40 million in a Swiss account. I will give you half." Reacher stepped closer. "I don't need money," Reacher said. "I don't have a bank account." "What do you want, Justice? Do you think killing me will bring Frank back?" Reacher stopped in front of Moore. He was a head taller than him. His shadow loomed over him. "No," Reacher said. "I don't care about justice. Justice is the business of the courts. And I don't trust the courts." He grabbed Moore by the collar of his suit. "I care about tidiness," Reacher said. "You are a messy pile of garbage, and I hate mess." He lifted Moore up. Moore struggled, his legs kicking in the air. He clung to Reacher's hands, his nails clawing in desperation. "Don't!" he shouted. "I am a genius! I am!" Reacher threw him through the glass window. The glass shattered. James Moore flew out into the air. His scream lasted for 2 seconds before it was cut off as his body hit the cliff below and fell into the dark abyss. Reacher stood looking down. There was no final impact sound. The chasm was too deep. The wind was too loud. He turned around. Inside the office, the computer screen was still lit, displaying the temperature chart of the reactor that had gone to zero. The system was dead. Reacher walked out of the building. Mary Ellen was waiting for him outside. She looked at him then, at the empty office. "Where is he?" "He's gone," Reacher said. "Left town. Forever, forever." Reacher looked to the east. The snowstorm was beginning to melt. The first rays of dawn were trying to break through the gray clouds. He checked the time in his head. 2:15 in the morning. "Take me to the highway," Reacher said. "I need to catch the bus at 3. Mary Ellen looked at him. She wanted to say thank you. She wanted to ask him where he would go. She wanted to keep him, but she looked into his eyes and understood that it was impossible. He was the wind. He was the storm. He came, ravaged what needed to be ravaged, and then he left. They walked down the mountain in silence. The town of Highgate still slept peacefully, unaware that the monster had been killed during the night. Highway 40 appeared at the foot of the slope, like a dark scar cutting across the white snow. The wind had calmed. The last snowflakes fell gently, slowly, and lazily. Reacher stopped. He raised his hand to block Mary Ellen's chest. 100 feet from the intersection, a Ford Crown Victoria patrol car was parked with the engine off, hiding behind a speed limit sign. No flashing lights, no headlights. The brown-yellow paint of the sheriff's department blended into the mud along the roadside. The sheriff, Mary Ellen, whispered. She recognized the car by the distinctive dent on the front bumper. Reacher observed. The exhaust was still emitting a steady stream of white smoke. The engine was idling to maintain the heating system. There were 2 people inside. They had seen the explosion. They had witnessed the flames coloring the night sky red. But they did not rush to rescue. They sat there, waiting, like vultures lurking at the edge of a battlefield. Who is he waiting for? Mary Ellen asked. Waiting for the survivor, Reacher said. If it's Walker, he'll wave his tail in greeting. If it's us, he'll open fire. Reacher looked around. There was no way around. On both sides of the road were cliffs and ravines. There was only one narrow path leading to the bus stop. He bent down and picked up a handful of gravel from the roadside. You follow me, Reacher said, 10 steps behind. If the gun goes off, drop down into the drainage ditch. He began to walk. In the middle of the road, no hiding. 2 figures in the police car moved. The car door opened. The sheriff stepped down from the driver's seat. A big, fat man, his belly spilling over his leather belt. He wore a wide-brimmed Stetson hat, holding a Remington 870. From the passenger seat, the skinny deputy, the one who had come to Doc Waterson's clinic, stepped out. He was holding a handgun. Both stood leaning against the car door, using it as a shield. The headlights turned on. Click! 2 beams of pale yellow halogen light shone directly into Reacher's face. Reacher did not squint. He kept walking. A steady pace, a stride of 36 inches. Stop! The sheriff shouted through the loudspeaker mounted on the car. Raise your hands. Reacher did not raise his hands. His arms hung naturally at his sides. He continued walking, 50 feet away. I said, stop. The sheriff repeated, his voice wavering slightly. He had seen Reacher's appearance. Torn clothes blackened with smoke, dried blood on his face. But what was more frightening was his demeanor, an unsettling calmness. Reacher stopped at a distance of 20 feet. Just enough for a normal voice to be heard. Lower your weapon, Reacher said. The sheriff scoffed, a twisted smile born of fear. You're the one who caused the mess up there, he said, jerking his chin towards the burning mountain. You're a terrorist. I have the right to shoot you on the spot. You're not a police officer, Reacher said. You're James Moore's cleanup crew, but Moore is dead. Your employment contract has ended. The sheriff stiffened. He glanced at the deputy. The news of Moore's death was a shock. He thought Moore was invincible, the king of this valley. You're lying, he growled. The boss never dies. He chambered a round in the shotgun. Swish, click. I will kill you, he said. Then I will kill the bitch following you. I will tell the FBI that you are the culprits of the explosion and that I eliminated you to protect national property. A perfect scenario, the logic of the corrupt. Reacher looked at the dark barrel of the gun aimed at his chest. The distance was 20 yards. The ammunition was .00 buckshot, 9 lead pellets with a diameter of 8.4 millimeters in a shell. At this distance, the spread was about 15 inches, enough to tear through his chest. He could not run faster than a bullet, but he could be faster than the reflexes of a fat drunk. Reacher looked into the eyes of the sheriff. He saw the man's pupils constrict. His index finger began to tighten on the trigger. Reacher threw the handful of gravel in his right hand, not thrown at the sheriff. He threw it straight up into the sky, an irrational act. The sheriff blinked. The natural reflex of the human eye is to be drawn to sudden movement. He followed the handful of gravel, 1/10 of a second. That was all Reacher needed. He lunged forward, not running straight. He ran in a zigzag pattern, a tactical movement to complicate the line of sight. The sheriff startled and turned back. He pulled the trigger. Bang! The gunshot rang out sharply. Reacher felt the rush of hot air brush past his right shoulder. The lead pellets struck the asphalt behind him, carving white streaks. He had closed the distance to 10 yards. The sheriff was panicking. He tried to chamber a second round. His hands were slippery with cold sweat. The deputy beside him raised his handgun. He fired wildly. 3 shots, all missed. He shot in a state of panic, not aiming, just pulling the trigger to relieve his fear. Reacher arrived. He did not slow down. He used his momentum to leap. Reacher's right foot slammed straight into the driver's side door. Bam! The heavy door slammed back into the sheriff. He was pinned between the edge of the door and the frame of the car. The sound of broken ribs echoed dryly like the snap of a dry twig. The shotgun flew away. He fell to the ground, clutching his chest, blood frothing from his mouth. Reacher landed on the ground. He turned to face the deputy. The deputy stood frozen. The gun in his hand trembled violently. He looked at Reacher as if seeing a demon rising from hell. "Drop the gun," Reacher said. The deputy let go. The gun fell to the pavement, clatter. Reacher stepped forward. He grabbed the deputy by the collar, lifting him up. His feet dangled 6 inches off the ground. "You went to Doc's clinic," Reacher said. "You threatened an old man. You threatened patients." "I was just following orders," the deputy stammered, tears and snot streaming down his face. "I didn't know anything." "You know," Reacher said. "You know the body's coming out of the quarry. You know Frank Ellen was killed. You know, but you chose to look the other way because you got a cut." Reacher threw a punch into his gut, not using full force, just enough to incapacitate his manhood. The deputy doubled over, vomiting onto Reacher's shoes. Reacher let him go. He curled up on the pavement, groaning. Reacher turned to the sheriff, who was gasping for breath by the wheel. He picked up the shotgun. He removed all the shells from the gun, throwing each one down the ravine. Then he took the barrel, raised it high, and slammed the stock down onto the concrete pavement. Crack! The wooden stock splintered. The gun broke in half. Reacher tossed the scrap metal onto the sheriff. "Frank Ellen," Reacher said. The sheriff looked up, his eyes vacant. I didn't kill him. Walker did. I just wrote the report." "You signed the death certificate," Reacher said. "You turned a murder into an accident. You used the government seal to wash the blood off the criminals." Reacher squatted down. He grabbed the sheriff's right hand, the hand that signed that death certificate. "This hand," Reacher said. The sheriff understood. He tried to pull his hand back, screaming. "No, please." Reacher didn't listen. He bent the index finger back until it touched the back of the hand. The sound of the bone breaking was small but sharp. Next was the middle finger, the ring finger. Reacher did it methodically, coldly, like a surgeon dislocating joints. The sheriff screamed until his voice was hoarse, and then fainted from the pain. Reacher stood up. He looked down at the mangled hand of the man. He would never hold a pen again, and certainly never hold a gun again. He walked to the police car, yanking the microphone cord from the radio. He pulled out the car keys and tossed them into the bushes by the roadside. Mary Ellen ran over. She stood looking at the 2 motionless policemen. She did not feel disgust. She felt a strange sense of relief. "Are they dead?" she asked. "Not yet," Reacher said. "They will live. Long enough to go to court. Or long enough to live the rest of their lives in disability." Reacher looked at the clock in his head. 2 hours and 50 minutes past midnight. "The bus is coming," he said. They continued walking towards the rest stop. Behind them, the flashing lights of the police car continued to spin, casting meaningless red and blue streaks onto the white snow, illuminating the 2 defeated men groaning in the cold of primal justice. Reacher did not look back. The wind whistled softly through the pines along the road, carrying the burnt smell of asphalt and ozone from the explosion. The snowstorm had completely stopped. The sky was clear, cold, and filled with stars. Reacher and Mary Ellen stood at the intersection of Highway 40. The bus stop was just a rusty metal sign, leaning crookedly by the roadside with no seats and no shelter. The clock in Reacher's head reported 2 hours and 58 minutes in the morning. In 2 minutes the bus would arrive, if it was on time. Mary Ellen leaned against the signpost. She had stopped shivering. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind exhaustion and a bone-chilling cold. She looked towards the 2 abandoned police cars 200 feet away. The flashing lights still spun steadily, the red and blue beams sweeping back and forth across the pavement like the breath of a dying monster. "They will find us," she said, her voice hoarse. "They will find you," Reacher corrected. "I will not be here." He took out a stack of $1,900 from his jacket pocket, the money Walker had thrown on the diner floor. He handed it to her. "Take it," Reacher said. "You will need cash for a lawyer." Mary Ellen looked at the stack of money, then at him. She did not refuse. She stuffed it into her filthy coat pocket. "What do I need a lawyer for? I am an accomplice. I drove the car into the gate." "You are a victim," Reacher interrupted. His voice was cold and decisive. "This is the script. Listen carefully." He looked straight into her eyes, forcing her to focus. "Moore kidnapped you. He took you to the quarry. He forced you to witness the illegal uranium enrichment process. An accident occurred. The reactor overloaded. He died in the explosion. You escaped. What about you? There is no one named Reacher. You escape on your own. You find the Dodge Ram and drive it through the gate to call for help. You are exhausted and pass out. When you wake up, everything is over. They won't believe it. The sheriff won't be able to say anything for at least 6 weeks with a broken jaw and a mangled hand," Reacher said. "Moreover, he is an accomplice. He will remain silent to lessen his charges. As for the deputy, he fears me more than he fears prison. He won't say a word." Reacher looked north, where the orange light still cast up into the sky from the fire at the quarry. "When the sun rises, the nuclear emergency response team from the Department of Energy will land here. The FBI will follow. This case exceeds state jurisdiction. Frank, your husband did not die in a work accident. He was killed to cover up a national security issue. The insurance company will have to pay 3 times the compensation." Mary Ellen nodded slowly. She began to understand. Reacher was not just destroying her enemies. He was rearranging the chessboard so she could continue to live. He was using the law and bureaucratic processes, things he hated, as weapons to protect her. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you doing all this? You don't even know us." Reacher looked down the road. "I don't like bullies," he said. Simple, concise. A beam of light swept around the distant bend. 3 o'clock sharp. The growl of a diesel engine echoed back. The Greyhound emerged from the darkness, large and sullen like a metal whale. The sound of the brakes hissing was deafening. The bus stopped. The door opened. The driver was a big black man wearing sunglasses despite the darkness. He looked at Reacher, then at Mary Ellen, assessing the situation through their disheveled appearance, but he did not ask. He had driven this route long enough to know when to remain silent. Reacher stepped up the stairs. "1 ticket to Denver," he said, handing over his last $10 bill. The driver tore the ticket. Reacher stuffed the ticket into his pocket. He turned back to look at Mary Ellen. She was still standing in the snow, small and alone. But her eyes were different. No longer the fear of a hunted animal, only the resolve of a survivor. "Thank you," she said. Her words were swallowed by the noise of the engine. Reacher nodded. A slight nod, almost imperceptible. "Lock the place up tight," he said. The car door closed. Reacher walked to the back of the vehicle. He chose the last long bench seat on the right, the best vantage point. He sat down, stretching his legs into the cramped space. The vehicle shuddered and began to move. Reacher looked through the dusty window. Mary Ellen shrank away and then disappeared around the bend. He rested his head against the cold glass. The clock in his head signaled 3 hours and 5 minutes. In the distance, coming from the opposite direction, the red and blue headlights began to appear on the horizon. A long convoy. Armored black vehicles, military trucks, helicopters buzzing overhead. The federal authorities were coming. They were coming to clean up the mess, to seal the scene, to write reports and hold press conferences. They would find uranium. They would find the body of James Moore at the bottom of the ravine. They would find the mercenaries with broken bones and acid burns. They would ask questions, but they would not find answers. The answers were sitting on an old bus rolling south, leaving behind a town that had been cleansed by fire and blood. Reacher closed his eyes. He adjusted his heartbeat down to 60. He needed to sleep a little. Denver was 4 hours away. There was hot coffee there. The bus wheels crunched on the soaked asphalt of West Park Avenue. The snow in Denver had melted into murky gray water. The skyscrapers of glass and steel reflected the morning sunlight, bright and cold. The clock in Reacher's head signaled 7 hours and 15 minutes in the morning. The Greyhound slowed down, weaving into the central bus station. The brakes hissed one last time, tired and decisive. The journey was over. Reacher stretched. His joints cracked. His left shoulder throbbed a little where the bullet had grazed him, but the wound had dried up. His body healed at the speed of a well-maintained biological machine. Mary Ellen woke up. She rubbed her eyes. The layer of dust from the quarry still clung to her hair, but the look of panic had vanished. She looked out the window, seeing the city, the vehicles, the order of civilization. "Are we here?" she asked. "We have arrived," Reacher said. People began to rummage for their luggage. Reacher had nothing to collect. He stood up, stepping into the aisle. Mary Ellen followed behind. They stepped off the bus. The smell of diesel fumes mingled with the aroma of freshly roasted coffee from a nearby Starbucks, the scent of the urban landscape. Reacher led Mary Ellen through the crowded waiting area. He paused at the entrance, where yellow taxis were lined up to pick up passengers. He pointed toward a solid gray building 4 blocks away. The American flag fluttered atop it. "The FBI office branch in Denver," Reacher said. "Go straight there. Don't talk to the local police. Ask to see the special agent in charge." Mary Ellen looked in the direction he pointed. Then she turned back to him. She clutched the hem of her dirty coat tightly. In her pocket was $1,900. "I will never see you again, will I?" she asked. It was not a hopeful question. It was a matter-of-fact confirmation. "Right," Reacher said. "What can I do for you?" "Anything." Reacher shook his head. "You already did. You survived." Mary Ellen stood on tiptoe. She intended to kiss his cheek, a gesture of gratitude. Reacher took a small step back, just enough to evade without being rude. He did not like attachments, no matter how small. She understood. She nodded, giving a faint smile. "Goodbye, Jack Reacher." "Goodbye, Mary." She turned away, walking towards the gray building. Her gait was initially hesitant, but after 10 steps, it became steady. She was no longer the widow of a warehouse manager. She was the sole witness to a nuclear conspiracy. She had a story to tell, and she would tell it. Reacher stood watching until she disappeared behind the morning pedestrian crowd. He turned around. He walked in the opposite direction. He needed coffee. He found an old-fashioned diner on 20th Street. The neon sign, red vinyl upholstered chairs, the strong smell of bacon. Reacher stepped inside. He chose a table in the corner, back against the wall, eyes facing the door. A habit. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with a large bun, placed the menu down in front of him. She glanced at his tattered clothes and the dried blood on his forehead, but made no comment. In this part of Denver, people did not ask questions. "Coffee," Reacher said. "And breakfast number 2. Sunny side up eggs, bacon, toast, mashed potatoes. Coffee will be right out," she said. 2 minutes later, a thick white mug was placed down. Steam rose vigorously. Reacher lifted the mug with both hands. He inhaled the aroma. Second-rate Arabica, brewed a bit weak but scalding hot. He took a big gulp. Caffeine surged into his bloodstream, reactivating sluggish neurons. On the opposite wall, a ceiling-mounted TV was broadcasting CNN's morning news. The ticker at the bottom of the screen read, "Major explosion at Colorado Mountain Quarry. Chemical leak suspected." A helicopter shot showed a massive column of black smoke rising from the Highgate Valley. Olive-green military trucks were blocking the only road. Men in full white protective suits were moving around the enormous sinkhole. The field reporter was talking about a serious industrial incident and high acid levels in the air. No one mentioned uranium. No one mentioned firearms. The government was cleaning up. They called it an accident to avoid panic. James Moore would be recorded as missing or dead in the incident. Walker and the mercenaries would disappear from the personnel records. Reacher looked at the screen with an impassive expression. He did not care what they called it. He knew the truth. And the truth was that the furnace had gone cold. The food plate was brought out. Hot eggs, sizzling fatty bacon. Reacher picked up his knife and fork. He ate with focus, methodical, refueling, protein for muscles, carbohydrates for the brain. He finished everything in 10 minutes. He placed a $20 bill on the table. The last bill. Reacher stood up and walked out the door. The sun was high in the sky. The air was getting warmer. He stood on the sidewalk, watching the rush of traffic. City buses, delivery trucks, shiny cars. Everyone had somewhere to go. They had jobs. They had families. They had bills to pay and responsibilities to bear. Reacher had nothing. He reached into his jacket pocket. Empty, no keys, no phone, no wallet, no bus ticket. He was completely free. A gentle breeze blew by, lifting the tattered edges of his coat. Reacher took a deep breath. The smell of freedom. It smelled of dust, gasoline, and endless possibilities. He looked to the west. The Rocky Mountains loomed in the distance, covered in white snow. Beyond the mountains lay Utah, Nevada, California, the Pacific Ocean, or he could head south, New Mexico, Texas. The Mexico border, the heat, and the desert. Reacher did not decide immediately. He began to walk. He walked along the sidewalk, blending into the crowd of strangers. He was taller than them, stronger than them, more dangerous than them, yet he drifted among them like a ghost in broad daylight. A man walking in the opposite direction accidentally bumped into his shoulder. The guy hurriedly apologized and sidestepped, not daring to look him in the eye. Reacher did not stop. He did not look back. The clock in his head kept ticking, every second, every minute. He was Jack Reacher, and the road was his home.